The internet has significantly changed the way many people consume anime, having opened the floodgates to viewing episodes closer and closer to their original airtime on Japanese television. Eventually, it became common for foreign fans to be exposed to episodes on the same day as the local debut each and every week, with subtitles and big companies promoting them. Now everyone around the world can be part of the same audience as soon as possible. Well, it doesn't always go off without a hitch, but this is practically the basis for the marketing of simulcasting. The same time frame and the same content, which includes the audio.
さきが好きだった。でも、守ろう一人にはできないし、どの道あの町では生きていけない。
However, the model for distributing dubs meant that they would still be put out several months or even years after the show finished airing, a point at which subbed anime came out so quickly and dubbed anime came out so slowly by comparison. Every fan is bound to have their preferences, but as we mentioned in our Which Did You See First video, there is a chance, albeit not a guarantee, that the initial version you come across will be the one to imprint on you. And it's worth noting that many of the most lauded English dubs came from times when they were more accessible by comparison. Simulcasting effectively shifted that tentpole of relevancy. Sword Art Online, Attack on Titan, One Punch Man, these and so many other hit shows were able to garner an international following before their English dubs even began production. The unfortunate reality is that there might only be a fraction of the audience left who are even remotely interested in a show or its dub by the time the latter comes out.
Buy it digital or wait for the DVD, they say. I say!
A lot of those viewers have already moved on to the next season of sub simulcasts, so there's a fair debate to be had as to how relevant or even necessary foreign dubs are to anime anymore.
So you're just a little obsolete. Hey, it happens to the best of us.
With that in mind, simultaneously streaming anime in both languages seems like the next logical step to keep them both on equal footing. Not only would viewers have the option to try both sooner, but fans of English dubs, or people who need to watch dubs due to certain disabilities, could enjoy anime the way they want to without feeling like they're falling behind the rest of the community.
I'd call that a win-win situation.
According to Funimation's website, this is at least partially where the logic for simuldubs came from. Granted, this company is far from the only one that's attempted to simultaneously stream anime in both English and Japanese, nor were they the first. However, for the sake of discussion, it makes sense to keep most of the focus on Funimation, as they've arguably been the most committed to it as an initiative, going so far as to trademark the word simuldub itself.
No matter what, we shall attain supremacy this season indeed.
Other companies give their similar ventures different names, but we tend to collectively refer to all of them as simuldubs, which certainly speaks to Funimation's contribution to the prevalence of the practice, especially since their straight-to-home release dubs have all but stopped. What began as just Psycho Pass Season 2 and Laughing Under the Clouds quickly turned into most of their seasonal catalog getting this treatment, trailing behind the subbed episodes a few weeks at most, with some even coming out the exact same day for a certain period.
Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange.
It's hard to believe it's only been a little more than 4 years since this all started, and it's not hard to see why so many staff rose to this challenge. It's a paradigm shift that should not be understated. And while yes, more options benefit the consumer, none of this changes the strenuous, multi-step process it'll often take just to have one dub produced. Except now, a lot of these steps must be condensed into a shorter time frame. To accommodate this new workflow, Funimation's recording studio currently runs 18 hours a day, with scheduled sessions packed in clusters, essentially making it such that people can work on multiple dubs back to back in the span of time it would have previously taken to produce just one. Granted, not every person on call works there regularly, but Funimation is probably one of the only studios that can make this happen on such a scale independently, given the high number of in-house booths they can record with. And even then, they've been working with Central Command Studios in LA for shows like Radiant and Tales of Zestiria the Cross. Multiple actors could each be recording for multiple shows every day for an extended period, and no matter how capable or dedicated to the practice one might be, literal actor fatigue is a risk that could sadly discourage or hurt a person's chances of working in the long run, especially considering the usual low pay that comes with dubbing anime. It's often said that limitations breed creativity, but how far does that go with dubbing? There are incredible actors and staff out there who can deliver top-notch results even with these new time constraints. But even though some simuldubs turn out better than others, we think it's only fair to assume that those constraints will have noticeable effects on things in the long run.
声とキャスティングは大事だよ。そこんとこちゃんとしないと。
Since a normal audition process is more time-consuming by comparison, pre-casting has more or less become the main method by which simuldub actors will be assigned roles at Funimation, outside some projects like My Hero Academia. As we've outlined in a prior video, pre-casting technically does have some benefits. It can allow newer, talented actors who might perform well but audition poorly to get opportunities sooner rather than later. It's also useful for projects with insanely tight schedules that need to conserve time for other stages of production. However, none of that negates the drawbacks of precasting that are only compounded by its use in so many shows per season, particularly in a system that relies on actor availability. Whether the talent is new or old, ideally you'd want to get the best person for each part, but sacrificing auditions limits the scope of what the best person for each part is. Not only does it keep prospective good picks off the radar, but it can also leave directors with people who aren't as appropriate as they originally thought if the actor they initially considered doesn't turn out to be the best fit in the long run. Creative decisions, like casting choices, are informed by the material and information available, but when those resources are limited, it might not result in adequate foresight. People ought to be cast based on how their characters are throughout the story, not just a first impression. However, some simuldubs offer a lot less context from the offset. Some actors or staff can and have circumvented this by examining the original source material, but not all anime are a one-to-one template for the manga, light novel, or video game that they're adapting. For something like My Hero Academia, the team at Funimation are very fortunate that the anime by and large is faithful to the original manga. But what about anime originals that don't have any source material to reference? What would happen if a show like Evangelion came out for the first time nowadays and was being simuldubbed? How would things play out if the characters were cast or adapted without knowledge of who they were and what their arc would be? Granted, it is an actor or director's job to be versatile and prepared for situations where they don't know absolutely everything, but if circumstances don't allow it, then is it really their fault? The world of anime ADR is incredibly technical for everyone involved, not just performers. It's done to the rhythm of flaps that don't give a damn about the English language, and original plotlines and scenes that don't always take Western cultural sensibilities into consideration. Using hypothetical time savers like machine translations of the Japanese script or reading aloud subtitles that weren't intended for acting will never be enough.
I know you trusting is very good this idea. Ever since birthing, I have made the war, so things like boobies I have never yet the knowing of.
Creativity, research, sensitivity, nuance. All of these things are needed to produce something that can be considered professional by Western standards while also honoring the original. Not only does putting too much pressure on this process run the risk of losing the original flavor or important narrative details, but less opportunity to iron out questionable creative decisions can give the impression that the adaptation process itself doesn't have the adequate level of respect. Things that received critique during a simuldub's initial run sometimes get fixed before the home video release, but these alterations are more akin to the visual corrections between a Japanese television broadcast and a Blu-ray release. They're fixes, not entirely new products, and as you can imagine, the internet is far from forgiving, especially since the fixes will probably be coming from the team that made the mistakes in the first place. To this day, we still get comments that try to refute the credibility of modern dubbing as a whole solely on the back of several simuldub-related incidents. We can't actually prove that these decisions wouldn't have been made had the dubs been straight-to-home releases with the appropriate time and quality control, but it doesn't change the fact that they continue to color many people's perceptions of anime localization in general. What gets put out first almost always leaves the bigger public impression, and sadly, this isn't just true for subbed anime beating dubbed anime in terms of general preference in the fansphere, but also for the faux pas made in simuldubs. Granted, creative changes have always been a part of anime adaptive scriptwriting. Again, these missteps in adaptation might have happened anyway, and if that were the case, the fact that the script could be reacted to in time before the home release is a good thing. However, it seems like the writing process at Funimation currently has become far more compartmentalized than it has been before simuldubing, and that can't be ignored as a potential factor. After reviewing the staff lists themselves from the past few years, it's prudent to note that it seems that no more simuldubs from Funimation are being written by anyone outside of Texas. Even then, it appears that some longtime local writers have stopped adapting scripts at Funimation altogether. While it is possible that a lot of these people took a step away from writing for more personal or even professional reasons, it's heavily implied that the current state of the industry brought about by simuldubs is at least partially to blame for this. Obviously, social media can't tell the full story, but some people like Patrick Seitz even seem to openly attribute his departure to simuldubing, which is ironic and honestly sad since he was one of the adaptive scriptwriters for the show that arguably started it all for Funimation. We remember back at the beginning of 2014 when the possibilities just seemed endless, an anime airing on Western television in English before it aired over in Japan. Adapting to such a strange, inconsistent environment might have worked in the dub team's favor, as every episode was so self-contained to the point where those aforementioned issues of continuity and foresight weren't as much of an issue for most of the content. But that didn't make dubbing Space Dandy any less of a nightmare on almost every level.
No more! Stop it! Stop it! Stop!
Sometimes actors were obligated to come in and perform like everything was fine despite being sick.
That was the deal. It was, you had to be totally available at all times to come in.
Sometimes writers had less than 2 days to adapt an entire episode script while also directing other projects.
The script to recording to mix to editing, every step along the way in our process had to be shortened to try to fit it into this schedule.
Sometimes they didn't even have a full week to record and mix an episode, or preview what was going to come out next because the episodes themselves just weren't done.
If this doesn't go like clockwork according to what's being projected here, we're not airing the episode on time.
Give me some of those sick beats!
The consistent element across these accounts is that Dandy was worth the tribulations. It was a celebration of some of Japan's best animation talent, both fresh and seasoned.
Like that one, and those, and all of them. Far too many to name.
Of course an anime like that deserves the very best treatment. However, looking back, it's kinda hard to watch the featurettes interviewing folks like J. Michael Tatum or Joe McDonald, and compare them to people's attitudes now because it's clear that what started as optimism about innovation changed into something else.
I love how it brings us into contact with the creative team on the other side of the world. So I love the process, and I think it's awesome, and I hope we do a lot more of that because I thought it was a blast.
What used to be a rare and fortunate opportunity has now become the standard, which unfortunately includes all those factors mentioned earlier. The era of simuldubs is a state that we could never have predicted the industry would be in even a few years ago. But the loss of such talent and emergence of such trying conditions can be seen as a wholly negative side effect to what should be a dub fan's dream come true. Maybe that's why some companies like Aniplex stopped trying so early on. It hardly seems worth the hassle after what people like Alex Von David went through. But what could the future of simuldubs look like? And moreover, how has it been handled in other parts of the industry? As we mentioned before, Funimation wasn't the first studio attempting to push for them. NYV Post may not produce simuldubs as often as other studios, but their contributions have arguably been some of the most important in the industry. It goes back to 10 years ago in 2009, when the studio's Sunrise show Kurokami aired on American television within the same day of its Japanese broadcast. This allowed ADR director Michael Sinter-Nicholas to meet Sunrise producer Akane Hagino, who would end up assisting NYV Post in producing the highly acclaimed dub of Gundam Unicorn.
Do you believe in the existence of new types?
With Hagino sitting in on every recording session, script assistance from published Gundam expert Mark Simmons, and brilliant performances from experienced actors on both coasts, everything about this dub was worthy of one of the most important entries in Universal Century, which would continue with the origin. The most immediate solution to tight schedules seems to be getting involved with an anime's development as early as possible. While it would undoubtedly help regarding the dub's prep, we're not too certain how it would affect the overall recording stage. Even on other projects, dubbing voices to unfinished visuals comes with the unique obstacle of having to course correct as details change in successive versions, as Sinter-Nicholas explains himself in this video linked in the description and the card above. It's also prudent to wait for the artistic contributions of the original Japanese voiceover team, lest the dub diverge too much. As we've seen, these obstacles can be overcome, but when these resources arrive is likely dependent on how the actual anime production is keeping up with its own schedule, which is an issue unto itself. Regardless, we think the sense of grassroots understanding between the American and Japanese staff members really shows in dubs like Unicorns. In fact, the ADR team had earned the trust of the Japanese producers to the extent that the New York sessions didn't even need to be supervised by them past a certain point. Now, the release schedule for Gundam OVAs certainly isn't weekly, as the gap between episodes can range from a few months to over half a year. Though this is all regarding working on a single simuldub. What about multiple simuldubs coming out around the same time? Perhaps companies will start prioritizing the titles that will get the most coverage or the most globally appealing, rather than simuldubbing the majority of what they have. Maybe established veterans will work on simuldubs while slowly integrating new talent and training them through straight home release dubs that have more lenient schedules. The issue that'll arise here is that it's tricky to guarantee what shows will be a hit and which ones can afford to wait before getting dubbed. Plenty of industry or genre-savvy fans could probably tell you what's going to be popular internationally from the first PV or the creators involved. Despite that, some licensors may want hard data on manga or light novel sales to help prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, and even then there are no guarantees. Likewise, I'm sure you could all think of a show or two that absolutely deserved to be simuldubbed and out in the open ASAP, but for some reason weren't. Then there's the prospect of outsourcing to share a huge amount of work among multiple studios. Netflix's anime originals and new acquisitions premiere as full seasons all at once, with multiple language subtitles and dubs, of which the English ones are currently handled by several LA-based studios. Similar outsourcing houses like Sound Cadence Studios, which we covered last video, might also jump at the opportunity to work on any show given to them since they're much less overworked. And there have been home release dubs distributed by FUNimation that were recorded at other studios. Parts of some simuldubs have been handled in LA for them too, although we're not quite sure why the practice hasn't been more extensive. However, the obvious challenge is that too much outsourcing without proper oversight could result in projects going to studios that aren't competent enough, something that I'm sure the folks at Netflix are now well aware of.
It won't be long before you're walking properly. You see, you've had some very slight nerve damage, and it probably will feel a bit strange until you get used to it again.
Given Sony's plan to have Funimation establish more of a quote global presence, something like creating branches in other regions sounds like it would coincide with that. A lot of anime gets licensed each season, and this would allow access to more talent that could provide dubs as varied as the shows acquired, taking more advantage of what's out there rather than staying in one place. Then there's the scenario in which the majority of regular seasonal simuldubing just stops. To some, this sounds like an appealing option, as it offers the implication that we'd see quality on par with some of the best dubs that came before simuldubing. But again, bad dubs have always existed alongside the good ones, and they probably always will for one reason or another. Quality versus quantity is vital to keep in mind, but quantity is still important regardless. When we consider subbed or dubbed, that very way of phrasing it suggests that the two have comparable significance for the community, and like it or not, simuldubs are a means of keeping that balance from tipping. Granted, the prominence of subbed anime nowadays is by no means a bad thing, as it demonstrates that Westerners can take a product seriously even if it's not in their language. The fact that so many people can listen to Japanese dialogue in Japanese animation and consider it normal instead of weird is a good sign regarding the appreciation of foreign culture. However, if the option to choose between the two versions takes so long to come around, then how likely will viewers be to habitually consider dubs normal in a similar way? Fans of dubs are likely already willing to wait, but what about everyone else? Even if the time spent is used to refine the adaptation and performances, dubs will probably become a special interest that's only related to the anime fandom, rather than one of two widely accepted means of consuming a product. But then again, maybe we're already getting close to that. Even with the significant amount of ground Funimation covers, and even with High Dive doing their smaller share, there are still plenty of anime per season that don't get simuldubs, and some just flat out don't get dubbed. There are just so many shows coming out nowadays, and instant online distribution is making it more and more accessible in subbed formats outside Japan, where it's being viewed by more and more people than ever before. Dubs being in some form of spotlight means that there's something to be lost if a flawed or subpar dub of a good anime gets exposure, which gives dubbing artists reason to hold their work to a higher standard and improve. However, if the overall impact of simuldubs can't create an environment where those standards can realistically be met consistently, then there's reason to be skeptical as to how the innovation should be handled.
Once your dreams have gotten rusty, that's all she wrote. Polish them all you want, but that ship has sailed.
If you made it this far in the video, we completely understand if it sounds like we're looking down on the commitment that's gone into the industry over the past few years, but that couldn't be further from the truth, as we're sure there have been people genuinely touched by the English renditions of some of these shows. Some of these dubs will probably outlive their place as seasonal convenience, standing the test of time regardless of how they're produced. We'd never dream of wanting to take accomplishments like that away from anyone, least of all the people working tirelessly to make these instantly dubbed anime happen. We simply can't speak for everyone, fans or creators, especially since a lot of what goes on at these places is sadly unknown to us. For Funimation specifically, with the Sony acquisition alongside the termination of the Crunchyroll partnership, we still don't know if things are going to get better or worse than we might have assumed. And heck, with how prominent the demand for anime is in China, who's to say if English localization will even be a particularly high priority for Japanese clients in the future anyway? Still, we feel this conversation is a prudent one to discuss now, as simuldubing becomes more prevalent than it ever was. Of course, opinions regarding dubs have always been subjective, but there are other factors at play here. What's anime dubbing going to be like 5 or 10 years from now if things continue the way that they are? Will people somehow power through such an unrelenting industry and strive to make better products to the point where problems end up fixing themselves? Or will the floor finally fall out from underneath them, causing the products to suffer and more talent to leave or get hurt? If there's even a chance of the latter happening, then we'd rather it get addressed now instead of later. Due to the nature of our content, we'll naturally have a bias to support the people who worked hard to create the projects we enjoy. But biases like this shouldn't just exist to celebrate the good, because we owe it to ourselves and to the people in the industry to acknowledge every part of it.
That was pretty deep in a stupid, rambling kind of way.
It was definitely stupid.
If any of you have any thoughts on Simuldubs, feel free to let us know in the comments down below, along with any other voiceover topics you'd like us to tackle in the future. Special thanks to Marissa Lenti for fact-checking this video for us, as well as being a supportful patron for the channel, alongside other amazing folks like Regan Carriere, Ryan Rodriguez, Seth Phillips, JR Pictures, Unknown Secret 1000, and so many more. This has been the Cartoon Cypher. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time.